Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. Great. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي زدني علما ربي يسر ولا تعسر ربي وتمم الخير. So as Abdul Khaliq said, we have had the privilege to translate and understand the whole of Surah Yusuf. And now it's up to us to take the lessons that we have learned from Surah Yusuf, the reflections, how we can use these lessons from Surah Yusuf and implement it into our daily life. So I will start off by doing the recitation of the Quran, ayahs from Surah Yusuf. So أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنا أنزلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين. صدق الله العظيم. So the translation of these ayahs are, indeed, we have sent it down as an Arabic Quran so that you all may understand. We narrate to you the best of the stories in what we have revealed towards you from this Quran. And even though you were unaware from before it, you were surely unaware from before it. So the Surah Yusuf is a very special surah for all of us, especially since we've read it and we've translated it and we've understood everything it says. This is a complete story. So no surah in the Quran before Surah Yusuf or after Surah Yusuf has been told in this way. It starts off in chronological order, meaning it tells everything in order from beginning to end. There are stories in the Quran, but none of them go completely in detail from beginning to end. So Yusuf is a very important one. And if you talk about Yusuf alayhi salam, he was a very exemplary, he was a very outstanding person. First off, he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was one of the most honored because if you look at his lineage, he was a son of Yaqub alayhi salam, who was a prophet, who was the son of Ishaq alayhi salam, who was also a prophet, who was the son of Ibrahim alayhi salam, who was a prophet and the friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see the blessings that have come down into this specific lineage and how the standards are, how Yaqub alayhi salam act, how Yusuf alayhi salam act. So what I will be doing today is I will be summarizing the story. I will do a quick recap of the story. And as I go through the story, I will be sharing the lessons that we learned. So I'll stop midway and I'll tell you the lessons that we learned from that specific point. So if we start off, the first thing, after a couple of verses, we get our first very important lesson. And so it starts off by Yusuf alayhi salam telling his father a dream that he has. He says, "Oh, my father, I see 11 stars, the sun and the moon, and they are all prostrating towards me." So if we stop here, the first lesson that we learn here is the connection between Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam. Because you see, Yusuf alayhi salam is telling his father his dream. So if we think about it, how many of us tell our dreams to our parents? So do you see how important this is? How many of your children narrate their dreams to you? It shows a very beautiful relationship between Yaqub alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam. So we need to ask how many of us have a beautiful relationship with our fathers, just like Yusuf alayhi salam did with Yaqub alayhi salam. So beautiful that whenever something important happens in their lives, they narrate it to their parents. So it's up to us. And whenever we're reading Surah Yusuf, there's no point in reading it without understanding one of this main lessons, the connection between father and son. Why did he tell his father? Why couldn't he tell his mother? Or why couldn't he tell his siblings? My bad. So why couldn't he tell his siblings? Instead, he knew his father was wise. You see the connection. He knew the wisdom in his father. So it's up to us to develop a beautiful relation with our parents, just like these two, so that when something important happens in our lives, we can tell our parents and they can help us with it. So after he tells his dad his dream, his dad replies to him by saying, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين. So his father replies to him by saying, "O my son, do not narrate your story, do not narrate your dream to your brothers, or they will devise or they will plan against you a plot. Indeed, the shaitan is a clear enemy to the human being." And right away, we get another lesson from this. It's a very dangerous thing to do, and it's up to us to stay away from it. And that is jealousy. So he tells them that, be careful. There's something known as jealousy that can overtake any one of us. The best amongst you can be affected with jealousy. So be careful what you tell them. Don't tell this to your brothers. So if we know the whole story, if we look at it, what happened, and essentially what happened to the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, they were all overtaken with jealousy. They were like, why does their father love show more affection to Yusuf alayhi salam than to us? So even though they were the children of a Nabi, they were children of Prophet, they were still affected with jealousy. This just shows us that even the best of the best can be affected with jealousy. And now we can't just say that Yaqub alayhi salam didn't raise his kids properly, that's why they were being jealous. But it's important to remember that no matter how good you raise your child, no matter how good children are being raised, there will always be challenges within the children, because sometimes maybe Allah's test for you is that your children might do things that you don't like, and Allah is trying to see how would you react to it, what do you take the results from this, and how do you fix your kids. And if we talking about the evil eye, there are two instances where avoiding jealousy is discussed in Surah Yusuf. So the first one is when the brothers were ordered to enter, if we remember, when the brothers were ordered by their father to enter the kingdom through different doors. And many scholars say that this is because so that people wouldn't look at them with the evil eye, and so that nothing would happen to them. And the second one instance is what we're talking about right now, when Yaqub alayhi salam told Yusuf alayhi salam to keep the dream a secret so that jealousy would not affect him. So that was the next lesson. So after that, his brothers, they go to their father and they tell him, let us take him out. So they take him out and they throw him in the well instead of killing him. And on the way back, they put blood on his shirt and they show it to his father. Now, of course, his father knows that they're lying, but instead of, complaining, the lesson that we can learn from this is trust in Allah's plan. Yusuf alayhi salam, you see him, he's thrown in the well. You see how everything, so from here on, the story is starting to go down. All the things that are going to happen to him are negative things. But you see the patience that he had, because in the end, we have to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a plan set up for us. He knows what is right for us and what is wrong for us. So in your life, when something negative happens, you shouldn't think that that's the end. Maybe it's the beginning of a master plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, if someone blocks you something, stops you from doing something, or someone wants to cause harm, or maybe your business is doing bad, it's all up to Allah's plan. It's maybe, for example, if you have wealth and that wealth is taken away from you, maybe that wealth wasn't good for you. Maybe Allah wants to increase you in wealth. So if, for example, and it can take many years for Allah's plan to work for us. It can take 10 years, it can take 20 or even 30. In Yusuf alayhi salam's case, according to many narrations, it was 40 years until he reunited back with his parents. But in the end, it's important to know that it all turns out the way Allah wants it, if He plans it for you. And one more thing I think that really describes this whole situation is negativity is not always negative. Because, for example, if we look at all the negative things, there must always be something positive in the long game. At the end, if we look beyond that thing might be benefiting us in ways that we can't even see. So that's what happened with Yusuf alayhi salam. He was denied the companionship of his father, the companionship of his family. He was denied the upbringing in that loving environment. But all of that, Allah substituted it for something even bigger. As we know, in the end, he turned into a minister, he turned into a king. So Allah, as you can see here, he had a very huge plan for him. So after Yaqub alayhi salam heard about this, that Yusuf alayhi salam was killed by the wolves, instead of complaining, instead of just giving up, he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala right away. He started praying to him, tears after tears. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, فَادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. So call to me and I will answer to you. So how I see it is, for example, if you want to talk to Allah, you're feeling down, I want to talk to Allah. What you should do is you should pray, because praying is a direct connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if, for example, you want Allah to talk to you, you want to listen to Allah talk, you should be reading the Qur'an. And if you relate it to our current Qur'an class, understanding Qur'an class, now we can kind of see why we spend so much time, so much effort in learning to understand the Quran. Because if, for example, you're talking to someone, they're talking in a foreign language to you, you won't understand anything and you wouldn't want to continue. But with the Quran, most people just read it without even understanding it. For example, you wouldn't do that with a normal book. So it's up to us to understand the Quran, to see the beauty of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to us, the commandments, the orders. For example, like my dad was saying, in Taraweeh, what's the point of going to Taraweeh if you're just standing there for an hour or so and just listening? You don't even understand what's happening, what's going on, what's the Shaykh or the Imam reciting. So understanding the Quran helps you know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to you. And Yaqub alayhi salam, he knows he's turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's crying to him, he's praying to him, so much so that in narrations his eyes went blind from the amount of crying he had. And you see here, if he wanted, he would have if he wanted, he could have kicked out the other brothers. He knew they were lying, of course, but he didn't do that. He didn't treat them like animals. He didn't treat them harshly. He still treated them normally. Instead, he called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I say calling to Allah, I don't mean complaining. He wasn't saying, "Oh Allah, why me? Why did you choose me? Why is it my son that you're taking away?" Instead, he was always asking for dua to protect his kids. Even later on, when his second kid was taken away, he was saying, "Oh Allah, bring all of them back to me." So it's one of the things important is, if you're turning to Allah, you shouldn't be questioning his decision, because we all know in the end it's something good will turn out. So instead, ask for dua, for protection, for safety, for knowledge. So after that, we go on to Yusuf alayhi salam. A caravan passes by, they pick him up from the well, and they go and sell him in the market in a city close by. And from there, he gets bought or enslaved by the minister. So the minister of that city bought him. And at this point, later on, Yusuf alayhi salam is grown into a young man. And the minister's wife, who was also wealthy, who was good looking, she tried to seduce Yusuf alayhi salam. She tried to make him do things that wasn't good for him. So now here we get another very important lesson. So if you want to have barakah in your life, if you want to have good deeds, if you want to have sustenance in your life, in your business, in your household, you should avoid sin. So you see, Yusuf alayhi salam, it was just him and the woman in the room. The woman was wealthy, she was good looking, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Yusuf alayhi salam so much in this world. He gave him the power, he gave him the authority, he had the wealth, he had the looks, and above all, he had the prophethood. So everything, was laid out in front of him. And if he wanted, he could have done anything. But it was Allah's plan to, keep him protected from the sins. So he declined and he tried leaving, but then she pulled his shirt and then ripped it. And then one of the witnesses said, let's check if she's lying or not. And then they found out that she was lying and she asked for forgiveness. But then later on, the woman in the city started talking, and she decided to invite them to a feast. And then she let out Yusuf alayhi salam, and they all saw him. And we all know the incident where they cut their hands with the knives, because they said, "Glory to Allah, how beautiful is this man." So now she says, the wife of the minister, she's like, you know what I saw in him, so I did what I did. So now you kind of understand. So after all of this, she tells him, you should listen to what I say, or else I will imprison you. And if it's Yusuf alayhi salam, he has no support, no one to help him out, no one to talk to him. And if he wanted, he could have just done the deed. He could have just done whatever the woman wanted him to do. But instead, he turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, look at the sincere dua he made. He said, قال رب السجن أحب إلي مما يدعونني إليه. He said, "O my Lord, the prison is more beloved to me than what they are calling me towards." So you can see the sincerity in this. Why he's saying, I don't care what they do, just save me from them. Like the prison, whatever they're saying, threatening me with, I would rather go to prison than to go into their hand, than to go do whatever they want me to do. So you see the sincerity, the faith, the level of iman that Yusuf alayhi salam has here. This is a level of iman that we should be aiming for when no one's around us, no one's there to stop us. We can do anything we want, but instead we turn away from the bad deed. We avoid that sin and we turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you see, by avoiding this sin, later on in the story, you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts barakah in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. You know how he reunites with his father and everything. So this is all a reward for avoiding all those sins. So then he goes into prison, and it's at this point he's just getting negatives after negatives happening to him. He's getting bad things. It just keeps going down for him. It seems like there's no hope. But Yusuf alayhi salam never backed down. He kept calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see how Allah rewarded him in the end. And that also gives us a lesson. Never give up. Never think that if something bad happens to us, that's the end of the world. Nah. Something good can come from it. So then, he goes into prison, and he has two cellmates, and they tell him to interpret their dreams. And before interpreting their dreams, you see the level of piety of Yusuf alayhi salam. Instead of first interpreting, he took the chance and he tried to spread deen. He tried to spread the religion to these two cellmates. He told them, I'm Yusuf, this is my lineage. And he gave them the examples of people who don't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, يا صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار. He said, "Oh, the companions of the prison, are multiple gods better? Or is it Allah that's better? Is it better to worship Allah or multiple gods?" And then, he preached to them. He told them more about the religion. And then he told them the dream. So then later on, so the king, he had a dream. We all know about the dream, about the cows, about the crops. So he called Yusuf alayhi salam to interpret it. And after he interpreted the dream to him and it came true, the king, he was like, I want to promote you to a minister, of how faithful you are, how trustworthy you are. So now from this point on, we see that before in the story, all the things were going down for Yusuf alayhi salam. But from this point, you see, after all of this hardship, all of this patience, all of the negatives he had, Allah is starting to turn the narrative. He's starting to give good things to Yusuf alayhi salam. So it's starting to go back up. So the negatives, all of them were ending and the positives were starting. And a very huge lesson we can learn from here is, if someone accuses you of something that you haven't done, just know that one day Allah will give you the opportunity to clear up your name. It might come 10 years later, it might come 20 years later, it might come after a whole lot of years. But one day the people will realize that what they did was wrong. And not only that, but in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, Allah will give you such a beautiful chance that the people who wronged you, they will come back to ask you for help. So when he came out of prison, he made sure, the women that cut their hands were all right. And that's when the minister's wife confessed, and she said, what I did was wrong, and he is from إِنَّهُ لَمِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. He is from the truthful ones. So it's up to us to be humble. Don't take advantage of the people that did us wrong. Instead, stay calm, because we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give us a chance to rectify things. If someone's blaming us, we are going to have a chance to prove ourselves. So next, after that, he turns into a minister, and then a couple of years later, there's a drought, as was said in the dream, and his brothers, the brothers that he has not seen in 20, 30 years, they are the ones coming to him for help now. So you see the switch in the characters, the switch in the roles here. Before Yusuf alayhi salam was extremely small, he had no power, and his brothers are the ones who put him in the well. But now you see he has authority, and his brothers are coming to ask him for food. So now, of course, they didn't recognize him. And here, if Yusuf alayhi salam wanted, he would have, turned them away. He would have told them, you guys did me wrong. I'm not giving you any food. But instead, he didn't do that. He didn't decide to take revenge. And this shows us how people should be using their authority to good use. So then we go on, the brothers come back a second time, and on the second time, Yusuf alayhi salam tells them, to bring a brother with you. So we know Yusuf alayhi salam had another brother from the same mother, and his name was Binyamin. And he told them to bring him the next time. So when they brought him, he wanted to stay connected with him. He wanted to know how it was going. So he wanted to keep him. So he decided a smart way. He put a mug, a drinking cup, in Binyamin's bag. And he told all the brothers that, I'm missing something. And whoever's bag it is found in, I will take him captive. They will be with me. So when they searched, they found it in Yusuf alayhi salam's brother's bag, Binyamin. And to this, the brothers, you see, they said, oh, it's not a surprise because, a brother before him also stole. He also stole the love of our father from us. So they're saying that, it's not a surprise, just take him because what he doesn't shock us because another brother of his, they're referring to Yusuf alayhi salam, he has done the same thing before. So now here you see one of the another side lessons that we can learn is sometimes silence is better. Yusuf alayhi salam didn't get mad at them for that. He just stayed quiet and he let Allah deal with the rest of it. So now later on, they come back to him and they realize that their father tells them to go back, and they go back and they realize that he's Yusuf, and he gives them a cloth to put on their father's eyes, and he will not be blind anymore. So then they all came to him, they all prostrated, and Yusuf alayhi salam, in response to that, he said this very beautiful ayah. It says, إنه من يتق ويصبر فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين. So indeed, whoever fears and whoever is patient, then indeed Allah does not waste the reward of the good doers. So if you want to be known as a good doer, you need to have these two things that are mentioned in this ayah. You need to have taqwa and you need to have sabr. These two things will definitely save you from the punishment of the hereafter. And if we think about it, one of the most difficult forms of patience is to accept the decision of Allah. So if we see Yusuf alayhi salam, that is what he was doing the whole time. He wasn't complaining. He was just agreeing whatever came in his way. He knew Allah had a better plan for him. So he just agreed with the decision of Allah. So especially when something negative happens to us, we speak about so many negative things today that can happen in our life, but we don't look beyond them into the positive things. So now that brings me on to one of the main lessons. So if I were to sum up this whole surah in one main lesson, this would be that lesson. And it would be to be a positive person. This whole surah, as I said, it shows us examples of patience, hardship, going through hardship, and being positive. Above all, being positive. You see, being positive is what gave Yusuf alayhi salam the ability to think properly, the ability to be wise, the ability to do the correct choices. For example, when the minister's wife was seducing him, he had the brain. Allah gave him the brain power to turn away from that bad deed. So it's up to us to, in our life, it's focus on the positives, don't focus on the negatives. So always bring positivity to you and to the people around you. And you should remember that anything that seems to be negative, like I said in the beginning of this talk, if something negative happens to you, you should know that it is a part of a master plan. What do I mean by master plan? Just look at Surah Yusuf alayhi salam's story. Did he know that when he was thrown into a well, that at the end of the story he would become a king? He didn't know that. He just knew that Allah had a plan for him. That was a master plan. Allah wanted to test him going throughout all these hardships, and then in the end he started rewarding him. So if you look at the story, this is a true example of from rags to riches, or from going all the way from the bottom to up. So you see, in the path of Yusuf alayhi salam, there were a lot of bumps and twists and turns, but in the end goal that he got was the pleasure of his father and the pleasure of his siblings. So I have talked a lot about the lessons and reflections that we have learned from Surah Yusuf and the story of Yusuf. And it's upon us that, just not let it in through one ear and let it out through the other. We should be using these lessons, all of these lessons, to turning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being positive, having patience, having taqwa, to use the lessons from the story and implement them into our daily life. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the personality and the patience and the hardship and the perseverance Yusuf alayhi salam had. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.